It was a cold morning, the kind that gnawed at your bones and made even the simplest tasks feel like an uphill battle. The cafe buzzed with the hum of conversation and the hiss of espresso machines. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, creating a sense of warmth and comfort in an otherwise chilly world. A man stepped into the cafe, his face framed by a well-worn hoodie. He walked with purpose, but there was a hesitance in his movements, like he wasn't quite sure he belonged. His eyes scanned the menu, but he wasn't reading the words. No. His eyes darted over the pictures, memorizing the images instead of the letters. James was deaf. His world was silent, and he had become so accustomed to the absence of sound that it often felt more like a part of him than something he had to navigate around. But today, something in his routine was about to change. James approached the counter, his hands slightly trembling as he fumbled for his wallet. The barista, a young woman named Sarah, greeted him with a smile. But when James opened his mouth to place his order, there was a pause. He stopped, looking at her, and then raised his fingers to his lips. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. He wasn't saying anything, but she could see the effort in his eyes. Her heart sank as she realized what was happening. She wasn't sure how to help him, but she was about to learn that kindness could bridge even the deepest silence. James had grown up in a world where words had no sound, but his parents made sure he never felt like an outsider. From an early age, they enrolled him in a special school for children with hearing loss, where he learned to read lips, sign language, and adapt to a world that didn't cater to his needs. He had always felt different, even though his parents had never treated him that way. But as he grew older, the world around him wasn't as kind. James was a teenager when he first realized how isolating it could be to walk through life without sound. Conversations at school were like distant echoes, always just out of reach. But it wasn't just the silence that made things difficult. It was the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle ways people treated him as if he wasn't fully capable. The whispers behind his back, the awkward pauses in conversations when he couldn't hear the punchline of a joke. Even the way people hesitated when they spoke to him, unsure of how to interact. After high school, James moved to the city, hoping to find a place where he could carve out a life for himself. He worked at a local bookstore during the day and spent his evenings attending classes at a community college. While he had learned to navigate the hearing world, it wasn't always easy. There were always moments where his silence felt like a barrier, and no matter how hard he tried, it was something he couldn't escape. Yet, coffee shops had always been his sanctuary. They were places where he could escape into his own world, surrounded by the hum of machines and people, a world where no one expected him to speak. He'd learned the art of ordering coffee with simple gestures, pointing to the menu, nodding, and smiling. But today, something felt different. Something was about to change the way he viewed the world forever. James stood in front of the counter, trying to get Sarah's attention without disturbing the other customers. He didn't want to make a scene, but the moment his fingers brushed against the wallet in his pocket, he felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his chest. He raised his hands and gestured for a small latte, his eyes following the words on the menu behind her, trying to make himself clear. But Sarah, the barista, just looked at him blankly. She had no idea what he was trying to say. She looked over her shoulder at the other baristas, who were busy preparing drinks, and then back at him. Her expression shifted from confusion to sympathy. "I'm sorry. What would you like?" Sarah asked, speaking the word slowly, as if hoping it would somehow make him understand. James felt a wave of frustration rise inside him. He had been through this countless times before. People assuming that because he couldn't hear, he couldn't understand. He looked at her, willing her to understand, but the silence between them stretched on. There was a long, painful pause before Sarah finally pointed to the menu behind her, asking if he wanted a small or a large latte. James felt his face flush with embarrassment, and in that moment, he wanted nothing more than to just walk out of the cafe and disappear into the silence of his world. But as he turned to leave, something unexpected happened. Sarah, noticing the tension in his eyes, quickly called out to him, "Wait, I think I can help." Before James could leave, Sarah had already pulled out her phone. She typed something quickly and held it up to him. It read, "Can we communicate with sign language?" "I know a little." James blinked in surprise. He had never expected a barista to know sign language. His hands hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. But as he looked at Sarah, he saw a sincerity in her eyes that gave him hope. Slowly, he signed, "Latte, please." Sarah smiled and nodded, signaling back the sign for latte before entering the order into the register. Then, without missing a beat, she began to ask him more questions in sign language, her movements slow and deliberate. She asked him how his day was going, how he liked his coffee, and even shared a story about her own experiences with communication barriers when she first moved to the city. James, surprised and touched by her effort, signed back, "This is rare. Not many people understand." Sarah's smile widened. "I try to learn whenever I can. It's important to make everyone feel seen." For the first time in a long while, James felt truly understood. His heart swelled with gratitude, and in that small moment, the world seemed to shift. What had started as an uncomfortable interaction had blossomed into something beautiful. Sarah wasn't just offering him a latte. She was offering him connection, understanding, and dignity. When James finally received his latte, Sarah handed it to him with a warm smile. "Thank you for being patient with me," she signed. "I hope to see you again soon." James smiled back, his heart full. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like he was seen for who he truly was. As he walked out of the cafe, a sense of peace washed over him. It was a small moment, but it meant the world to him. The world didn't have to be silent or distant. There were people like Sarah who made it their mission to bridge the gaps of communication with kindness and effort. People who didn't just see his silence, but recognized the person beneath it. Over the next few months, James became a regular at the cafe. He and Sarah developed a friendship, one built on mutual respect and understanding. Sarah continued to improve her sign language skills, and James, in turn, helped her learn more. They exchanged stories, shared laughs, and celebrated the beauty of communication in all its forms. Word of Sarah's kindness spread through the cafe, and soon, more customers came in. Some with hearing loss, others with different challenges of their own, looking for a place where they too could feel seen. Sarah had unknowingly created a space where everyone belonged, regardless of the silence that might separate them. James, inspired by the warmth and generosity he had experienced, eventually started volunteering at a local organization for the deaf, helping others navigate a world that often felt indifferent to their needs. He knew that if he could help even one person feel as seen as he did that day in the cafe, it would be worth it. If you believe that kindness and understanding can change the world, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Echo Tales for more powerful stories that remind us all of the beauty in human connection. Together, we can create a world where no one has to feel invisible.